Sixth graders, thank you for tuning in to the first extra credit webinar of 2015. We're going to be talking today about the spreading of the Muslim religion east into the subcontinent of India and the impact it had on that region of the world. As you know, we've been talking recently about the Middle Ages, the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, kind of the rise of the new Muslim religion around the Arabian Peninsula. And actually, I'm going to show you guys a little map here. Okay. Here would be the Arabian Peninsula. You can see today you've got countries like Iraq and Saudi Arabia and Oman here. Saudi Arabia. There's Syria, Iraq. Okay. This would be Jordan here. Okay. There would be Lebanon, Israel, Egypt, of course, being cut off, but over here. Then you've got Iran, you've got Afghanistan, we've got Turkey, right? In modern-day Turkey would be where the Ottoman Empire started, and then it spread throughout Saudi Arabia, and it spread west, as we talked about in class. But we're going to look today about its spread east through India, into India through Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc. And if you remember, we talked about this when we talked about Alexander the Great, but there is a mountain range that runs north and east of Pakistan, between Afghanistan and Pakistan, called the Hindu Kush. And then you've got the Himalayan mountains that run northwest of India, all of which sort of act as a barrier for the Indian subcontinent, keeping the people that live there in, keeping foreigners out. At least for a long period of history, that was the case. Well, as you know, the Ottoman Empire, arose under Turkish-speaking sultans. We talked about Suleiman, right? And that's going to start at the beginning of the Middle Ages, right after the death of Muhammad. Of course, those sultans are going to die as time passes, and later a new sultan named Mahmud decides to invade India through the Khyber Pass in 1001 AD, so at the extreme height, right in the middle of the Dark Ages. Okay, and he does so because his advisors tell him that India is full of gold and jewels, and the people there are infidels. They won't be able to protect themselves, and a lot of stories had been coming out of India. Of course, very few people had been there because of the Hindu Kush and the Himalayan mountains, keeping that subcontinent so separate that legends started to develop. And Mahmud, being the greedy sultan that he was, he wanted to find out if that was true, and he wanted to take the treasures for himself. So he amasses a huge army, and they mount on horseback with their archers, and they move through the Khyber Pass and into India. And when they get there, they find that some of the legends are true, and some of them, like usual, are not as true as they had heard. In fact, the Indian people are not the infidels that they thought they were. They are mounted on elephants, so they're very formidable soldiers. They're led by Rajas, who, just like had fought against Alexander the Great, are going to put up a very strong fight against Mahmud. And what's going to happen is it's going to turn into less of a military defeat for Mahmud and more of his soldiers are going to start pillaging and looting and tearing down Hindi temples. Okay, if you remember at the beginning of the year, we talked about the Hindi religion being the major religion in India. And so his soldiers are going to be robbing and looting and burning down Hindi temples and taking these treasures. And over the course of 10, 15 years, they're going to kind of nestle in a little bit of the northern region of India for themselves here, okay? But they're never going to make it, all the way into the Indian subcontinent because there's too much resistance that they face when they first get there. But however, Mahmud will concentrate his treasures to build a capital known as Delhi. And today, even New Delhi is still the capital of India. Okay, so he's creating a capital in the northern part of the subcontinent that will stand to this day. and a very large capital, very populated capital, very beautiful city. And just like the sultans before him, he will eventually die, and he'll be followed by other Muslim sultans after his death, such as Babur and Tamerlane. And all of these Muslim sultans are going to try to spread their religion throughout India. They're going to try to conquer more and more land, and they're going to be met with some success. Okay, by the time we get to the end of the Middle Ages, about 10% of the people of India have converted to Muslim, okay, or to Islam. That might not sound like a big chunk, but when we're talking the most densely populated country in the world of over 1 billion people, 10% is roughly 100 million Muslims in that country. So even today, you've got 10% of the people, give or take, that are Muslim in India. And this goes back to the invasion of Mahmud and the Ottomans in 1001 AD. So it's been 1,000 years or more in the making. Anyway, what happens is, for the first few years, the Muslim invaders are met with stiff Hindi resistance, and militarily they're never going to be able to impose their will like they thought they would. However, they do get converts from the Hindi people, because if you remember, the Hindi people in India were under the system of the castes, right? They were all put into different social orders, and the people in the lowest caste knew that their ability to climb the social ladder was limited. They were going to stay in their caste for the rest of their life. So they saw the religion of Islam as a chance maybe to increase their own stature in life, their own ability to rise. And so some of them would convert because they like the idea of getting out of the Hindi caste system. Others converted simply because they were conquered and they were told by the Muslim sultans that either they convert or they die. But for both of those reasons, the Muslim invaders will have some relative amount of success, okay, and it will, if nothing else, leave a permanent Muslim stamp in India today, and there'll be a separate nation that is completely Muslim created because of all of this, okay? Because if we fast forward into the 1800s, Great Britain will take over India. The British Empire will take it under their wing, the jewel in the crown, as they would call it. And they would actually take over in 1857 and rule for nearly 100 years until 1947. After World War II, the British decided to grant independence to India, okay, the entire Indian subcontinent. And again, you've got roughly 1 billion people there, and you've got some that are Hindi and some that are Muslim. And they've been warring for 1,000 years. And as soon as the British leave, they're going to continue warring for a couple of years. And so what happens is they decide and agree to sign a partition, which means they separate India into two countries. Okay, one country for the largely Hindi population, that country being India, and the other country that branches off in the partition is Pakistan. Okay, so at one time, India and Pakistan were all one nation. Okay, again, here would be the Hindu Kush Mountains, here would be the Himalayan mountains, okay, and then you have Pakistan and India, okay, as one nation. Well, in 1947, what's called the partition, the Muslims who lived there were to move to Pakistan and live in a Muslim government, okay, and the people that were Hindi were to stay in India and live under a Hindi government in India, okay. So this is just a good example of how the history we talk about in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages is still, very relevant today. Okay, and it plays a role in why the countries that today are the way they are. It also explains why Iran and Afghanistan, okay, and Iraq would be Muslim nations, because the Ottomans spread through what is now Iraq, what is now Iran, Afghanistan, through Pakistan, right, and into India. So it's, when they spread their empire, they took with them their religion. That's why Iran and Afghanistan, Iraq are, heavily Muslim nations today. So, anyway, there's a couple questions for you if you want to try for the extra credit. And I said that the Muslim Sultan Mahmud invaded India in what year? That's question one. What year was it that the Muslim Sultan Mahmud invaded India? The second question is, when they invaded, they were met with stiff resistance from the Hindi soldiers who were mounted. And what was it they were mounted on? What made those Hindi soldiers so formidable? And then lastly, the third question is, I said that Mahmud would rob and loot and pillage, and then he created a capital in India for his Muslim empire. What was the name of that capital that's still the capital today of India? Okay, so those are the three questions. You can write them on a separate sheet of paper and bring them to me if you want the extra credit. Thank you.